After yet another loss during which the Giants' defense fell well short of expectations, losing another fourth quarter lead, the New York Giants have finally moved on from defensive coordinator Shane Bowen. Mike Kafka made that official this morning. Ed Valentine, a Big Blue View here, along with Tony DelGenio, to talk about the firing, to talk about the state of your 2-10 New York Giants here on the Big Blue View YouTube channel. Thank you for hopping on. Thank you for joining the show. Please drop your comments, drop your questions, and we'll get to some of those as we move along here. Tony, thank you for hopping on.
Glad to be here.
This new schedule with Mike Kafka doing his pressers on early on Monday morning is kind of messing with me. I don't know if it's messing with you.
No, I'm okay with that.
But
I think you have things to juggle than I do.
I think that nobody ever wants to see somebody lose their job, lose their livelihood. But I think that that this was a move that plain and simple had to be made. Maybe, well, I won't even say maybe, probably should have been made by Brian Daboll a long time ago. Your thoughts on Shane Bowen no longer being Giants defensive coordinator?
Yeah, so I think I agree that it's a move that Daboll could have made earlier. I have a few thoughts on that. My take on Daboll not doing it is that he made a mess of things when Wink Martindale was the defensive coordinator. Not that he wasn't justified getting rid of Wink because of things that were going on, and Wink had his own little fiefdom there, and so on and so forth. And so I can't blame him for getting rid of Wink, but he did it in a way that made it into a bigger mess than it should have been. So I wondered as a result of that whether he was super cautious about the Shane Bowen situation and didn't want to do anything hastily, and felt that he wasn't in a position where he could easily fire another defensive coordinator when his own job was on the line. I don't know. As for Mike Kafka doing it, I saw the first comment in the window here that he should have announced this post game on the podium, and I strongly disagree with that. You don't make any decision like that 2 minutes after a game is over, and you're not 2 minutes, but 10 minutes, whenever, after
Right.
a game is over, and you're just walking up to the podium. He may have indeed made that decision before the game was even over. Once he saw what the Lions running game was doing to the Giants defense, but that's definitely a big decision like that. Something that you don't do without getting a night's sleep and waking up the next morning and making sure you want to do it before you actually do it. So I think Kafka handled that the right way.
Absolutely, Tony. Years ago, John Mara had to be talked off the cliff of firing Tom Coughlin after a really, really bad loss in Jacksonville. I think that was back in 2014. And there were reports that 2 or 3 weeks before Brian Daboll did get fired, that John Mara wanted to fire him, I think, after the Denver loss. But you don't make that decision when you're emotional, when you're angry, when your blood is pumping, and when you can't think. You make that decision after you've had time to calm down and you can think about rationally, the impacts of it and whether it's the right thing to do. And one of the things I wanted to point out, I was on Mike Kafka's Zoom call just a little while ago when he discussed this move, and he was asked why now, and he said this was the right time. He said he didn't want to make this decision right after he took the job. He wanted to see the defense. He wanted to get his hands on the defense. He wanted to have some time to digest what was going on. And even after last night, when it was kind of clear the way he managed the game, that he had lost faith in the defense, he said he wanted to go home. He wanted to watch the film. He wanted to look at it again and then make his decision, and he made that decision this morning and moved on. And I give him credit for trying to take the emotion out of it, for just watching the film, and for talking to the people that are important to him and making that decision. It's so frustrating. I think Paul Schwartz wrote this morning that no matter what decisions the Giants seem to make this year, they all turn out wrong. And to Shane Bowen's credit, somewhat, he was more aggressive yesterday, I thought, but still, when the players aren't buying what you're selling, it's kind of obvious on the field, and the results were just so awful that I don't think the Giants could have gone forward any farther with Shane as the coordinator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm looking at the comments, and first of all, it was after 2 games, not 3 games, and so Kafka gave Bowen a week, the Green Bay game, to get it done, and Green Bay went down and scored the winning points after the Giants had taken the lead late in the fourth quarter, and then he gave him this second thing. So I think Kafka handled this exactly the way he should have handled it, and the unfortunate thing, and if I will say one thing in Shane Bowen's defense, and it's only this one thing, is that he doesn't have Carl Banks, Harry Carson, and Lawrence Taylor out there at linebacker.
No, he does not.
to defend against the run on this team. And so, I think what you're going to find is that until the Giants get a few players out there at certain positions, and I think off-ball linebacker is high on the list, they're going to continue to have a porous run defense. And of course, it's more than just the run defense. Yesterday, the run defense was the big culprit. In other games, it's been the soft pass defense that was the main culprit, right? But there were multiple reasons.
Yeah. The run defense has been miserable for 2 years, and it's getting worse. And that was the reason that the Giants hired Shane Bowen, was because they thought he could fix it.
Yeah, that's right, and he didn't. But again,
nope.
I don't think the coach is the only problem there.
Let's be honest.
The GM too.
Let's be honest. A Giants player last night, you don't want to see the locker room fracture. Okay. You do not want to see players point fingers at each other. I was not in the Giants locker room last night. I don't go to the road games. But one of the quotes that I read, Javon Holland, Giants safety, was asked, he was basically asked why the Giants are having so much trouble, and especially yesterday, why they had so much trouble, tackling Jahmyr Gibbs at the second level. And this borders on throwing the front 7 under the bus. In fact, it kind of is throwing the front 7 under the bus, but I don't necessarily like it, but it's the truth. And Javon Holland said, Jahmyr Gibbs is coming through the line untouched, running full speed when he gets to us. Basically, what are we supposed to do? He's already running full speed in a straight line, hasn't even had to make a cut. And I'm paraphrasing, but he hasn't even had to make a cut. He's just running at full speed. What are we supposed to do when he's already at top speed? We're trying to bring him down, but and the fact of the matter is, he's 100% right. You don't have defensive linemen when Dexter Lawrence is not on the field who can get off blocks and hold the line of scrimmage. You don't have linebackers who can properly fill their gaps and make tackles. And you too often get missed tackles in the secondary. But again, when these guys are running full speed untouched, what are you going to do? So yeah, but you don't want to see the locker room fracture. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But I fully get what Javon Holland is saying. And absolutely, Tony, they need more talent on the defensive side of the ball. And, we could probably spend an entire show talking about Joe Shane, but there just isn't enough talent, at the linebacker level. There isn't enough talent. There are a lot of edge guys, obviously. There just isn't enough talent in the down defensive linemen supporting Dexter Lawrence. And that's why when everybody said, oh, look at how great the Giants' defensive front seven is, at the beginning of the year, I still had questions because they have one great defensive lineman who's not having a great year. And they have terrific play from the edges, or should have terrific play from the edges. But what else do they really have?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, so they've got a rookie defensive tackle, Darius Alexander, who is kind of starting to come on as far as his pass rush is concerned. But I think he is not yet a good run defender, and I don't know whether he ever will be a good run defender, but he is starting to give them a little bit of an interior pass rush. And basically the other guys they have are, what we would call jags, right? Just
nondescript.
Right?
Yes, nondescript.
Yeah. Right? And that's their problem. Against a team like Detroit, you really want to have good interior defensive linemen against the run, because that they rely a lot on the running game, and with good reason. Jahmyr Gibbs is one of the best running backs in the NFL. I mean, arguably top 3 running back in the NFL, right? And Montgomery's not bad either, but Gibbs is really the guy. And the Giants just don't have that. They haven't, and again, we always come back. They always come back to the Eagles. I do anyway, and what do the Eagles, do? They draft defensive linemen back-to-back years in round 1, right? The Giants don't do stuff like that, right? The Giants always leave that position to the later rounds if they do it, and you can talk about different strategies for what you should do early and late in the draft, but somewhere along the line it became obvious, and it wasn't just this year, that the Giants' interior defensive line was inadequate, and they just haven't solved that problem yet from a personnel standpoint, never mind the scheme.
No, they have not. And I always say that both sides of the ball, the offensive and defensive lines, you simply have to use draft resources and maybe even financial resources in free agency to supplement those positions every single year. It just has to be done. When this was the first year, this past draft, when Joe Shane drafted Darius Alexander in the 3rd round, this was the first time he had used any sort of draft pick above day 3. I think above, on the interior of the defensive line, and I'm sorry, but it shows. You've got Jordan Riley on the practice squad who can't get a uniform. You've got DJ Davidson playing snaps he probably shouldn't have to play. You've got Rakeem Nunez-Roches and Roy Robertson Harris, who are maybe decent rotational depth, probably playing far too many snaps. And you just don't have enough there. I want to talk about, while we're talking about depth, we do need to talk a little bit about Dexter Lawrence and the fact that Dexter was not on the field, on the first play of overtime. A lot of questions about that last night. I don't know if you saw it yet, Tony, but Mike Kafka did shed more light on that this morning. Dex played 53% of the snaps last night. I don't know what his injury is, but the Giants made the decision apparently early in the game that Dex was only going to play on obvious passing downs. So he wasn't in the game on that first play in overtime. He wasn't in the game. That was the 69-yard run by Jahmyr Gibbs. He wasn't in the game on either of Jahmyr Gibbs' 49-yard runs either. And Kafka said this morning that Dex was in tears on the sideline because he couldn't get out there. He couldn't play more snaps because he couldn't get out there in overtime, to help his team. So we need to find out more about what Dexter Lawrence's injury is and what impact that's going to have on him going forward. But the obvious reaction last night was, who's the idiot who kept Dexter Lawrence off the field, when the game is on the line? And I was probably guilty of that myself. But when you get some perspective and when you hear Mike Kafka explain how much Dexter wanted to be out there, and the fact that the Giants just felt like they couldn't play him more than they did, then you understand it a little bit more, and maybe you give maybe you cut whether it was Coach Andre Patterson that decided not to have him out there, whether it was Bowen. Maybe you cut them a break just a little bit, but it's unfortunate. And every time he's not out there, it just proves again and again and again. The last thing I'll say, because I know I'm going on and on a little bit, I fully supported a couple of years ago when the Giants traded Leonard Williams, because I knew they didn't want to give him big money. As a guy that was turning 30, they didn't want to give him a big money contract coming off a year where he had injuries for the first time in his career. And it looked like he was on the backside of his career, which he has since proven not to be. But the problem wasn't trading away Leonard Williams. The problem is not having found someone to replace him.
Right.
So that's a lot.
And I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing for Shane to have done. People do it all the time. They get rid of the expensive veteran, and and people complain about Leonard Williams because he's playing well in Seattle, but other than his contract year, he wasn't the force that the Giants really hoped he would be. He was a solid interior defensive lineman, no doubt about it. But as you said, you don't get rid of that guy without having a plan in place to replace him, and not just replace him with a body, replace him with someone who has the potential to be a plus player as well. And Shane has never tried to do that. As you say, he's just like plugged the hole with jacks. Okay, basically, right? And and it shows. All right, and so this is part of my frustration with Shane is that sometimes his philosophy of how to put together the 53-man roster is something that makes me scratch my head, and interior defensive line is one of those ways. I think I like the pick of Darius Alexander in the top of the third round, and it looks like that may turn out to be a good pick for them, but you have to respect the running game of other teams. And really in today's NFL, when running is starting to make a little bit of a comeback in the NFL after kind of a few down years, right now you see, you have people like Gibbs, naturally you have Saquon Barkley, you have so Josh Jacobs last week, and so on. I mean, there are a lot of good running backs in the NFL, and running is becoming a more important part of the NFL again. And the Giants' defensive roster is just not constructed to address that part of the game.
No, and it's interesting. There's a comment in our in our chat that it says it's hard to pick a defensive lineman in the top 5, and I understand that, but the problem is that in 4 drafts, you've only used one first or second one, or I want to say day one or day two pick on the defensive line. You haven't used any early resources on the off-ball linebacker position. And again, I understand the positional value, but it's interesting. Look at the football team the Giants played on Sunday. A couple of years ago, they drafted in round 1 in the top 20. They drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, and they followed that up, a running back, of course, a great running back. And they followed that up by drafting inside linebacker Jack Campbell in the first round. And people thought they were nuts because there's, the positional value. You can't draft those guys that early. And they drafted 2 of them. Last I checked, the Detroit Lions are doing okay. And those guys are a big part of it. So you draft, and I understand the positional value, but sometimes there are things you just have to pay attention to, and the Giants haven't done enough of it.
Yeah, and right, and yeah, I feel that and you can do it in ways other than the draft, right? You can go out and sign free agents to plug those holes when you think you can't do that in the draft. So even if you have that philosophy that you shouldn't draft a linebacker in the first round, and actually I more or less sign on to that myself. I mean, I think you can you say day 1 or day 2, and so if you want to take a linebacker in the second round, I think you can find a perfectly good linebacker in the second round most years. But barring that, then you have to bring someone in free agency, right? And I look at what Washington did this year. Naturally, Washington's having their own problems this year because Jaden Daniels has been gone most of the season. But one of the first things that Adam Peters did when he got to Washington was he signed Bobby Wagner as a free agent. And so that and granted, Bobby Wagner is getting on in years, but he's still a good football player. And the Giants have just not had a linebacker of that quality, let's say, on their team since I don't know when. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they got one great year out of Blake Martinez in 2020, and you saw that season how having a really effective and run defending linebacker can be, right? I mean,
Bobby Okereke had a really good year for the Giants his first year.
Right. And then I don't know what happened to him, whether it's just that he was a perfect fit for Wink's defense and he's not a perfect fit for what Shane Bowen was trying to do, but he hasn't been the same guy since that first year under Wink.
Right. Tony, let's talk about the new interim defensive coordinator, Charlie Bullard. Now, I've sat in a couple of position coach pressers. The Giants do these things every few weeks where they make the position coaches available to the media. A lot of times they do that in the off season. During the regular season, they do it a few times a year. So I've had a few opportunities to talk to Charlie Bullard. He seems like a nice guy, 41-year-old, outside linebackers coach. Seems like he knows what he's doing, but none of us knows what Charlie Bullard is going to bring to this job. The only thing that we can go by is a little bit of his resume. Mike Kafka said he's detail-oriented, he's aggressive, he's a good coach. He said that Bullard will have autonomy to make whatever schematic and personnel changes that he deems necessary, which there's only 5 games left. There's only 6 weeks left in the season. You can't do everything that you would like to do. But the only interesting thing you can look at with Charlie Bullard is some of the coaches that he has worked for. He worked under Vance Joseph, now in Denver, one of the best defensive coordinators in the league for several years. In Miami, Bullard worked under Matt Burke, who, if you don't know Matt Burke's name, he is defensive coordinator for the Houston Texans, who might currently have the best defense in the NFL. So he has worked for some really good people. He knows what really good defense looks like. Can he transform a Giants defense that needs more help, needs more help personnel wise, as we've said. But can he help this defense over the next 5 weeks? We'll find out. But I thought it was interesting that they went to Bullen instead of one of the guys on the staff who has done the defensive coordinator thing before.
Yeah, and as you say, it's very little time to do a lot. I guess my question is, and it's not just a matter of being, I think, more aggressive. I think it's a matter of confusing opposing offenses as well, and that's one of the things that I felt Bowen really didn't do much of. It seemed like quarterbacks could walk up to the line of scrimmage and have a pretty good idea of what they were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't see a lot of changes after the snap, rotations out of too high, let's say, into cover 3 or something like that, or whatever. And I mean, you can't change the personnel at this point in the season. The personnel are the personnel, right? And so I feel like the one thing that you can possibly do, though, is to make it a little bit tougher for the quarterback to diagnose what the defense is trying to do on any given play. And obviously there's this issue of playing soft versus playing up more, right? And that has hurt the Giants several times. So, there are those things you might imagine him doing, but yeah, you can't expect miracles at this point in the season, and the personnel are the personnel.
Absolutely. And you're right about the disguising defenses and doing some things. And there is a comment about Spencer Rattler all the way back in week 5, saying that the Giants don't disguise their intentions defensively at all. And there is that. And the other thing that always bothers me is you watch the Giants when they rush 4, and very rarely when they rush 4 is there any disguise about which 4 guys are coming. And very rarely do we see twists and stunts that try to make it more difficult, for the offensive line to block guys. When they send 5, it's on the 5th guy is almost always the inside linebacker playing next to Bobby Okereke. So when they're going to send 5, you almost always know who the 5th guy is going to be, and you almost always know what gap he's coming through. So, I think you want to see more disguise. You want to see it would be nice to see a corner blitz once in a blue moon, or a safety blitz once in a blue moon, or a zone blitz where if you're going to send 4, but you send a different 4. You drop one of the edge guys back into the middle of the field, or you drop one of the defensive tackles back into the middle of the field just once in a blue moon. But beyond that, I also think that part of what's happening here is it killed me on one of those long runs by Jahmyr Gibbs to see him break 3 tackles in the secondary. And I know what Javon Holland said. I talked about it earlier, but I just feel like this defense has gotten to the point where it's not playing with enough urgency, because they're always thinking, oh, we're going to screw this up, or the coordinator's not going to put us in the right place, or we don't like this play call, or the other guys out here aren't doing their jobs the way they need to be done, and I'm just not selling out to make this play. And I think that's part of it too. So we'll see what happens. I hope that Charlie Bullen has some impact, at least on the effort that we're seeing from some of these players.
Yeah, and one thing that he can do, and I have no idea how much of this is already done in that room, but I think one of the first things you can do is to ask the players, what would you like to do that we're not doing. Right. And because I'm sure if players feel that their input's being listened to, they can approach the defensive game plan with more enthusiasm than they probably have coming out of yesterday's game. And you have to kind of get away for them to buy in for these last 5 games of the season. And that's one way to do it, is to see, what you think, what they think they should be doing, and then try to implement at least some of that to the extent possible, so that they go into games feeling like they have a game plan that they feel that they can execute successfully.
I do know that some of the players said that Bowen was trying to do that and that they appreciated him trying to do that. But I think that in the end, I think that Shane was just Shane, and he had the way that he liked to play defense, and his mentality just wasn't creative enough or aggressive enough. And in the end, that was just going to impact the calls that he made, even though he tried to be a little bit more aggressive. He just didn't have a feel, I don't think, for that style of defensive football. And we'll see if Charlie Bullard does. We'll see. This is a showcase for him too. Now it's a showcase for him to see if he can be a defensive coordinator in this league, just like it's a showcase right now for Mike Kafka to see if he can be a head coach in this league, or Giants head coach, or a head coach elsewhere. And Tony, I think we need to talk about Kafka a little bit, and we need to talk about the 4th down decision that he made yesterday. And if folks pay attention to @BigBlueView on X, and if they pay attention to the website, they know that I had a little bit of back and forth with longtime NFL columnist Gary Myers last night. And Gary's a guy that I like, and a guy that I'm friendly with, and I've had him on the show a couple times, and he's been helpful to me. But he and I saw that play vastly differently. I thought that Mike Kafka going for it on 4th down was 100% the right thing for the Giants to do with 3 minutes to go, up by 3 points. I get the whole, run the ball, make them use their timeouts, make them try to defend the run, all that. I get all that. Here's the bottom line. Mike Kafka, with 3 minutes to go in that game, made it crystal clear that he did not trust the Giants defense. And I fully agreed with him at that point. There was only one way the Giants were going to win that football game with 3 minutes to go, and it was to take a 2-score lead. That was my view on that. If they kick a field goal, they're giving the ball to Detroit with 2.5 minutes left, down by 6. They're probably giving it to Detroit about around the 35-yard line. Does anyone believe that the Giants would have kept Detroit, which would have called plays differently at that point, taken more shots? Does anybody believe the Giants would have kept the Lions out of the end zone? I certainly don't. So I fully believed that the only way for the Giants to win the football game in regulation at that point was to have a 2-score lead and make it impossible for Detroit to have enough time to score 2 touchdowns. So I don't know how you felt about it.
So I was on the fence about it, but thinking about it, I decided it was probably a good thing to do. I mean, I had several feelings about what was going on in that whole series there down near the goal line. And the first thing is that while I'm thrilled with the progress the Giants offensive line has made under Carmen Brasillo, there's still not a great run blocking line. And they in particular have problems early in the game. It seems to me blocking for the run, and then they get better as the game goes on and they start to open up holes. But there's still not a great run blocking line. And I'm looking at the Giants there with 1st and goal at the 4-yard line, and thinking, if this is the Philadelphia Eagles, they're just going to do 2 or 3 tush pushes and guarantee themselves that they'll get the ball into the end zone for the touchdown, and then they'll never get to having to make a 4th down decision there, right? But the Giants got 2 yards on 1st down with Tyrone Tracy. And then they try to pass on 2nd down from the 2. And then on 3rd down, they ran Devin Singletary, who lost 4 yards. And it's like only the Giants can have 1st and goal at the 4 and find themselves 4th and goal at the 6. Right. And so, to me, one of their priorities for next year has to be an offensive lineman, probably a guard, who's a devastating run blocker, if they can find that in free agency or the draft. They need some guy to run behind who can get you those tough yards. That was one thing. But then the other part of it was, as you say, you don't expect the Giants defense the way it is to be able to keep Detroit out of the end zone. And if you wanted proof of that, what happened when Detroit got the ball back in overtime, right? One play,
Right.
69
One
yards,
play.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
when
And then
the point of the
starting out at the 35, so they'd only have 65 yards to go, right? And
Yeah.
and so that that's the other thing naturally, is that if you go for it and miss it, then Detroit's on its own 6-yard line, having to go a long way, and of course, any other team in the NFL, when the opposing team asks their kicker to make a 59-yard field goal to tie the game and send it into overtime, any other team, that 59-yard field goal attempt would go wide, and that one looked like it was going wide, and then it curled just inside the post. But the Giants always give up those super long field goals to opponents at the ends of games, and they never ever get lucky and have a field goal kicker miss one of those.
And it's a 64-yard field goal. If Javon Holland, a veteran player who should know better, doesn't do something stupid and rip the ball out of the hands of a Detroit player and get a delay of game penalty that cost the Giants 5 yards. If that's a 64-yard kick, it doesn't get there. It doesn't get there. So it's just amazing that that the Giants keep doing it to themselves, and that in the end, if you have a good defense, if you have a reliable defense, if you're a top tier team and you can trust your defense, it's fine. You can make an argument that you put the game in the hands of the defense, but anyone who's watched the Giants play all year long had to understand that if the Giants were going to put that game in the last couple of minutes in the hands of their defense, which they ended up having to do, but if they were going to put the game in the hands of their defense, they were not going to win it. They were not going to win it. I said to my wife when the 4th quarter started and the Giants were ahead, how are they going to blow this one? Because we knew they would, and the only way for them to win that game yesterday was for the offense to win that game in the last 3 minutes and punch that thing in the end zone. And we can criticize Kafka's play calling there. In all honesty, I saw people kill him for the 2nd down pass, which went incomplete because it allowed Detroit it allowed Detroit to save some time. It allowed them to save a timeout. And I get it. But I've said this ever since Kevin Gilbride was the offensive coordinator, and people at Big Blue View used to kill Kevin Gilbride, a Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator. They used to kill him for his play calls because his offense wasn't necessarily pretty. It was based on the home run. All right. And it didn't always look like it was efficient because it wasn't. It was based on the big play. A good play call is one that works. A bad play call is one that doesn't. All right. Kafka is getting praised up and down for the flea flicker and for the pass to Jameis Winston. But if Gunnar Olszewski throws that pass to Jameis Winston and he gets blown up in the secondary and ends up with a concussion, and we're watching Russell Wilson play quarterback in the second half of that game, Kafka would be getting destroyed. But the play worked. And Jameis had fun with it. He made a nice catch. He made a stiff arm. He made the Heisman pose. He did all that stuff. And it looked great. The play worked. So he's getting praised. If that pass to Theo Johnson is complete, Mike Kafka is getting praised up and down in all corners of the NFL for being aggressive there and for not just running the football and doing what everybody expected him to do. And the play didn't work. So he's getting killed. And that's just the nature of the beast in the NFL. Happened to Tom Coughlin, happens to Andy Reid sometimes, happens to everybody. If it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, it was terrible.
Yeah. And I don't blame him much for what happened yesterday. I mean, the one thing we've spent this whole pod talking about the Giants' defense or lack thereof, but the fact is that this team that has been offensively inept for years now and has lost its starting quarterback, its clearly wide receiver one, seemingly their running back one for the season, they're putting up 25, 30 points almost every week on some of the better defenses in the NFL. I mean, right? Mm-hmm. They embarrassed the Eagles defense for a good part of the game. They dominated the Denver defense, and like nobody's beating Denver right these days. They scored against Green Bay, another team with a tough defense, and they put 27 up yesterday against Detroit. I mean, they're doing it week after week after week after week, and it's like nobody's noticing it because the defense is so terrible. But the Giants are like one of the best offensive teams in the NFL. They were 500 yards yesterday or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're averaging, Tony, they're averaging 22 points a game. Okay. And that's the most points a game they've averaged since 2018, Daniel Jones' rookie year. And if I had told you at the beginning of the year that the Giants, who averaged 15 and 16 points a game in 2023 and 2024, if I had told you they could get to 22 points a game, there's no chance that you or anyone would have said, oh, but they'll still be 2-10. No chance. You get to 22 points a game, that is basically right around league average. You should have a chance to win every week. And the Giants have had a chance to win a lot of weeks and haven't done it. Just real quickly,
and that 22 points a game average, right, is held down by the early season when they only scored 6 against Washington in the opener, and then 9 against Kansas City, and then 14 against New Orleans in that terrible game. Since then, right, 34, 32, 20, 24, 20, 20, 27. I mean, they're they're scoring points every weekend against good defenses too. So, and that's without their best offensive players.
They are 22nd in the league in scoring, which isn't great, but when you look at it, they are 1.2 points per game behind the Philadelphia Eagles, okay, who are 17th in the league. So they're basically 1 point a game off being league average. They're 6 to 7 points ahead of where they've been the last 2 years. 22 points a game is enough to give you an opportunity to win football games most weeks, to at least be competitive, to have a chance in the fourth quarter. And And it's stunning that they're 2-10 with all of that going on. Tony, the last thing I want to say is I have no idea at this point if Mike Kafka has a legitimate shot at the full-time head coaching job going into next year. But the man is coaching his rear end off. He is, in my estimation, he's pushing almost all the right buttons. He has that team playing really hard. The offense, as we've pointed out, is overachieving, and it's a shame that they're not winning more games. But Mike Kafka, I mean, he's showing some level-headedness on the sideline. Running down the sideline to call some timeouts. When the play clock was running down. I just give him a ton of credit for what he's done in 2 weeks. And it's hard not to like what you've seen. But like I said, I have no idea if he has a legitimate shot at being the head coach next year.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. Obviously, we have to see what happens these last 5 weeks, but I mean, he's the one calling the plays. And again, they're putting all these points up on the board against some good defenses without their best offensive players. And so what more do you want out of your offensive coordinator than that? And for the rest of the job, he's not doing ridiculous things that make it look like he's overmatched as a head coach. And so, let's say things keep moving this way, and let's say that the Giants start to have a little bit more success on defense because they change things up and they actually win a couple of games down the stretch. I would just as soon they stay with Kafka and make him the head coach next year. It's not like he's coming out of the blue. He's somebody who has been looking for a head coaching job for several years now. He's been going to college all-star games and coaching there to get experience. And as you say, I'm not seeing anything that makes it look like he is not qualified to take the job, right? And so why not just do it? Just make them. And again, we had to see how the last 5 games go, and if they have a kind of Joe Judge type of meltdown over the last 5 games, then you say, well, then you have no choice but to get rid of them. But if they're fighting and scratching and clawing and getting a couple of wins these last 5 weeks, then it says that the players are at some level buying into what he's selling. And he seems competent, he seems innovative, and why not do the easy thing instead of having this parade of candidates and the next hot guy, blah 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 blah, right? Coming in to possibly be your coach. Why not just stick with the guy you've got? And I'd be happy with that, assuming the last 5 weeks go reasonably well.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about Kafka is, look, you go all the way back to the days of Tom Landry and Vince Lombardi. How many times? And I'm not saying that Kafka could be this guy, but you go Lombardi, you go Landry, you go Belichick, you go Sean Payton, all right? Dan Campbell was a player for the Giants, okay? And that's a whole different category, basically. But how many times over their history have the Giants had the coach in the building? All right, how many times you can even maybe put Steve Spagnuolo in that category if you want to, although he hasn't done it as a head coach. But how many times have they had that head coach in the building and let him get away and let him go have, that sort of high level of success somewhere else? I don't have a problem, and I still don't think he's going to get the job, but I don't have a problem from what we've seen so far And again, the next 5 weeks we'll see as well. But I don't have a problem right now with the idea of giving Mike Kafka the job long term.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm seeing comments in the window. Give us a defensive coordinator that'll maximize the players and we win. I won't go that far because I think they still have personnel holds on the defensive side. But what we will do is get a chance, we hope, to see a different approach to defensive coordinator over these last 5 weeks, and we'll see whether Bullen does actually approach things differently, and if he does, whether they wind up having more success on defense than they were having under Shane Bowen. And so I still think they're going to need players next year because I don't think they've got 11 starting caliber players on that defense. But I mean, you'd always like to bring in this, the star. I mean, like Shula seems to be the hot guy at the moment because he's got the Rams defense playing really, really well, and and all of that. And I'm not saying that he wouldn't be a great hire either if you were to get him, but if you have guys in house that look like they're competent, look like they might even be good, and again, what has Kafka done in these first 2 weeks as head coach to make you think that he wouldn't be a good head coach? And he seems to be doing everything kind of, okay. He can't make the defense stop the other team when they're not capable of doing it. So why not let him do it? And actually, I had a little question about that. If the Giants hire Kafka as their permanent head coach, do they get the 2 comp picks from the Rooney Rule?
No, they do not. Unfortunately,
no,
they do not. It's only if another team hires him. Right.
That's too bad. That would have been nice, but it wouldn't be a consideration anyway whether he should be hired or not.
But the last thing I'm going to say is, the Giants have the Patriots this week, but they have the Commanders, they have the Vikings, they have the Raiders. They have the Cowboys too, and the Cowboys are better than anybody wants to give them credit for, and they just beat the Eagles and all of that. But there are 3 eminently winnable games on the Giants' schedule here in the last 5. Tony, what in the world is going to happen in the Big Blue View comments section if the Giants actually win those games and blow the number 2 overall pick in the draft? What's going to happen if Kafka and Charlie Bullard do a good job for the next 6 weeks? And win some games? Oh, people are going to be mad.
Well, even 5 and 12 would still give them a pretty reasonable draft pick. So
yes, it would.
Yeah. So but I mean, I'm dreaming about that number 2 pick that they have right now, and I'm saying to myself, oh man, you're number 2, and you've got probably 2 college quarterbacks out there that teams will want to draft in the top 5, right? Most likely. And I say, oh man, trade down, pick up an extra first round pick in 2027, pick up an extra day 2 pick this year, and you can start to fill some of those holes. So yeah, there's a side of me after each loss that says, well, at least that number 2 draft pick is still in play for them.
Believe me, I've been playing around with the same idea, but you know what? Here's the thing. If you get extra picks, but 5 and 12 is still going to put you in the top 10 probably. So we'll see what happens, but 5 more games, 6 more weeks. We'll see what happens, but all in all, I think today was a day that Giants fans have been waiting for, have been wanting for a long time. Shane Bowen out as defensive coordinator, Charlie Bullard in. First real big move of Mike Kafka's tenure. And we'll see over the next few weeks what it does. Tony, thank you as always for the time. Giants fans, thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.